issues there. Well, I don't know where you want to start from. We'd like to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abati. I'd like to start from the issue of Operation Wettier that is actually causing, problems here and there. I mean, I like the way the APC actually countered Governor Makinde, trying to tell him that he's someone in government and he should be very careful of the sort of words that he puts out there. And the sort of speech that came out from the summit in Ibadan is not expected of him. But then, I also want to juxtapose this with what the APC itself did while in opposition towards the 2015 general election. Now, don't forget, sometime in 2012, we had its principal galvanizer, then Major General Muhammadu Buhari, who was the arrowhead of that coalition of the APC that later merged into this political party, making some very strong rhetoric, which really caused an uproar. And APC will go ahead to continue to make some kind of statements that are very, very strong. But then I want to link what General Buhari said then to what President Tinubu said recently. And then, of course, what Femi Gbajabiamila, Chief of Staff to Mr. President, said. I would like to start with what Femi Gbajabiamila said recently. Now, recently, during the issues of him meeting with Leke Abejide, Honorable Leke Abejide, during his wife's birthday, you would have heard the sort of rhetoric that came out of that meeting. And in that rhetoric, Gbajabiamila was very strong. Now, Gbajabiamila, being the symbol of the presidency led by President Bola Tinubu, had this to say, that my charge is to you is to stay in that same party, fight them, scatter them, hold on to your party, do not abandon them. We like what you are doing. Hold on to your party, do not abandon it. Now, when you hear a senior member of the Tinubu presidency, the one who organizes Tinubu's office, making that kind of statement, wouldn't the opposition, reply that kind of rhetoric? Because a senior government official should not be using that kind of word, saying that we like what you're doing, scatter them, and all of that. So my thinking is that Governor Makinde and these opposition leaders would have gone ahead to sit down, calculate, and then think that that is the thinking of the Tinubu administration towards the next election. They are willing to scatter the opposition, to do anything to cause problem. And so they had to look for ways to actually reply them. But then you go back to what Major General Buhari has said in 2012, while he was still the leader of the CPC. And this is what he has said, very, very strong and harsh rhetoric, which politicians should not be saying, but which they keep saying to cause trouble within the country. So he will then go ahead and say, and I want to quote him directly, that if what happened in 2011, that's the alleged rigging, should again happen in 2015, by the grace of God, the dog and the baboon will all be soaked in blood. He did not elaborate further, but then he would go ahead and even say, look, there are three forms of Boko Haram in Nigeria. The Boko Haram that was founded by Mohammed Yusuf, the Boko Haram that has been taken advantage of by criminal elements, terrorists, and all of that, and that the biggest of all Boko Haram is the federal government of Nigeria. Now, that caused a whole lot of uproar, and I know you were in government then, Dr. Abati, and how a whole lot of Nigerians were very angry with those kind of words coming from someone who was not just the face of the opposition, but someone who was a former military head of state of Nigeria. So, and now juxtapose it with what President Tinubu said just last week. What did he say? President Tinubu himself, in addressing some other issues, says, on the issues of the economy, said, the late Muhammadu Buhari is me. He was a partner, If I took over from him, is that not from myself? So if something is wrong, fine, live with it, correct it, move on. The life voyage is not going to be easy, and so many of you are traveling with me and all of that. Now, so that means whatever Buhari has said to push out the PDP administration, to threaten then the federal government then, was also subscribed to by then, former governor of Lagos, Bola Tinubu, who was his partner. Because he said Buhari is his partner, whatever he did, he said, and all of that, he accepts both the assets and the liabilities. Now, if you juxtapose all of this, you will see that we're entering into a dangerous trend that political actors need to watch the sort of rhetoric that they put out, whether those in government or those out of government. Because the APC now doesn't have the moral right to criticize Governor Makinde when the chief of staff to the president, a former speaker of the Federal House of Representatives, could actually mention those kind of words and ask a seven honorable member to go and destroy the opposition using anything, and that they are happy at the presidency with those kind of things. Now, let's get back to Operation Wet here. What really happened? That was between 1962 and 1965. That problem emanated from the action group, which was led by its leader then, Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Now, Chief Obafemi Awolowo was the leader of the action group, but he left in 1959 to join the federal government. And in the course of that, the party leadership was divided. Now, Akintola was the premier of the Western region who took over. So there was a divided loyalty in the action group, which was the governing party in the Southwest, or the Western region as it was then called. And so some of the action group members decided to side with Awolowo, that those in the action group should not align with the center. But then those who were with Akintola agreed that they were going to align with the Northern People's Congress, the governing party then. And then, of course, you will see that this would then lead to alliances in 1964 towards the 1965 election. And in those alliances, there were two alliances that were formed. The United Progressive Grand Alliance, which was led by the Action Group, the National Council of Nigerians and Cameroons, led by Nnamdi Azikiwe. And then you have other smaller political parties that followed. What are the other smaller political parties? The other ones are like Borno Youth Movement was one of it. The Northern Elements Progressive Union, NEPU, led by Aminu Kanu, was one of it. And then the United Middle Belt Congress was one of it. And then there was also another alliance that was formed by the MPC, which was the Nigerian National Alliance. That Nigerian National Alliance had other political parties like the Niger Delta Congress, which is now metamorphosing into the Nigeria Democratic Congress, as you will see it. And we also had the NNDP, the Nigerian National Development Party, a Democratic Party led by Akintola himself, which is a splinter group of the Action Group. And then we now had Dynamic Party, which was led by Professor Chike Obi, that famous, mathematician, which was the culmination of the intellectuals at the University of Ibadan then. And then the leader of that alliance was the late Sir Ahmadu Bello, while the leader of the opposition, OPGA alliance, was, of course, Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Now, because of the outcome of the 1965 election, it was rigged, blatantly rigged, and because of that, there was uproar everywhere, and politicians were being set ablaze, with tires being hung on people's neck, houses being burnt belonging to politicians of opposing side, and then the House of Assembly then, the Western House of Assembly, being set ablaze and all of that. Is this where these politicians want to take us to? And that's why I'm calling on elder statesmen in Nigeria, former presidents, to actually take interest in the rhetoric that's coming out. Yes, it's allowed for you to go and form, coalition or alliances like they have done. But nonetheless, the security agencies must watch those in government and out of government to be careful in the kind of rhetoric that they push out in trying to win votes. Because if not, we may not have a country at the end of the day because of this, band of politicians. Let's pay interest, a keen interest in it as journalists too, not to promote the sort of rhetoric that these people are trying to promote, because it could burn down the country, whether in government or out of government. Now, as to what they decided to do at that Ibadan, summit, it's a democratic setting, and people are allowed to meet. And I see the way the APC National Secretary is saying that there should be discountenance and all of that. Isn't it the APC too that was always saying that the opposition are not organized? They even pushed out a statement where they said that they cannot help the opposition to manage its affairs or to organize. So if the opposition leaders have agreed to come together and they're organizing themselves, what is the essence of, trying to make it look like they are stoking fire in that party? So I'll just ask the political actors in the country to allow democracy to prevail, because if not, at the end of the day, the democracy may collapse like it happened in 1965, which was the precursor to 1966. And so we must be on the guard to watch and not allow political elements like this to destabilize the country. As for the other stories that we've had, the support President Tinubu is getting from Governor Fubara, I mean, what else would you have expected for someone who has not been able to even define his own political path? He's trying to galvanize, politics towards President Tinubu, because right now nobody knows or can even count Governor Fubara as one of those politicians, that his voice really counts in the polity, because he's really lost out. I hear he's been trying to fight for an automatic ticket and is banking on the president to be able to suppress the Wike, phenomenon in Rivers State. And that's why he's gone ahead to gather all the traditional rulers in the southern part of the country to see how, they can be able to push support for President Tinubu. Very fantastic. I commend him for doing that. But I can tell him that is one of the biggest political letdown for his supporters in Rivers State, because there's no political direction. The sea movement and all of that, everybody is just there confused. And this is the sort of politics that we're seeing, including the governing APC, that people are fighting for automatic tickets instead of going to go and face their party members through direct primaries to get tickets, because everybody is counting on the president. And because of that, President Tinubu has a whole lot of IOUs that he holds to politicians. But he himself is beginning to discover that he cannot do it alone, because the forces of the governors will pull him down. And so, in summary, the federal lawmakers that are counting on President Tinubu to get the automatic tickets have now come to the reality that until they serve the Nigerian people, whatever they've done in the past 3 years has been in vain, because the thinking was that every bill that President Tinubu brings to the National Assembly, they will push it in its favor because he was going to grant them automatic ticket. Now, if you look at what has happened now, they are all living in regret. Many of them have been speaking with, they keep telling me that if they had known that they were not going to be given the ticket, they wouldn't even have defected into the APC, because that's what they were promised. So, but well, what do we now call this situation? That's why nationalism must return to our political circle. We must set the agenda as the Nigerian people for politicians. And for all the issues that we've had with, political leaders who have been going around, like Peter Obi, who was claiming that he was denied, the opportunity to speak in OAU, Obafemi Awolowo University. I mean, I think that those kind of things should not be happening. The school authorities, if they had previously, given the room, the go-ahead for Peter Obi to be present, why didn't the security arrangements, make it very clear for him to be able to come, only for at the last minute for that to happen? This kind of issues are what, will make people think that the government continues to have a hand in some of these issues. But the opposition political leaders too must organize themselves, because look at what is beginning to come out now. Some of the political leaders in other parties or factional leaders are beginning to say that they were not consulted before that agreement was reached. But the Electoral Act also does not recognize a single candidate being featured by multiple political parties. So the political parties should know that each political party, according to the Electoral Act 2026, must produce one single presidential candidate. Indeed. So are they telling us that they are going to step down their own presidential candidate and adopt only one? Then that will be a form of alliance. And so as we await, this critical 5 weeks that's left, first of all, to May 10, and then, of course, till May 30th, I want our politicians to be watchful of the rhetoric, because Operation Wetia was not a child's play. And I can tell you, can engulf the nation, and we won't have the country to call ours.
Especially as we still have a few months to go to the elections. Therefore, we need to really